Please follow the verse here. Paul says, "Now I urge you, brothers." You see that? See where I'm reading? Verse 15. Then there's this M dash in most translations, right? There's this M dash, this long dash. "I urge you, brothers," M dash. Now skip down to where the M dash ends. It says, "Be subject to such as these." You see that? That's the first phrase in verse 16. Be subject to such as these. In other words, Paul is saying this: I urge you, brothers, be subject to such as these. All right. So you know that the instructions he is giving here is who you should listen to, who you should be influenced by in the church. Who should you be influenced by? The answer falls in between the M dashes. He says this, first of all, going back to verse 15. "Now I urge you, brothers, you know." First of all, you know. You know who should be influencing you in the church. You know. He says, "You know that the household of Stephanas," there was a guy named Stephanas, and his whole household had apparently come to faith. "You know that the household of Stephanas were the first converts of Achaia." What does this mean? Except that when Paul went to the region called Achaia and he preached the gospel, these were the very first people who responded to his gospel. Jesus went and got them first. He couldn't wait for Paul to get there. Christ was just waiting in heaven, and then Paul came to Achaia, started preaching the gospel, and then Jesus went and got him. I was just waiting. I like this one, and I like this one, and I like this one, and I like this one. These are the people who are going to respond like first. I like them. Blessed are you. If you're in a church plant, do you realize, like a small church like this, some of you are the first converts. Just think, later on our church might be 1,000 people. And one day you'll think back and remember, I was one of the first converts. That says something. That says Christ thought something about you. He said, if I'm going to build this church, I'm going to have you to do it. You've got to be here. Can you believe this, Zach? The Lord just did not want to get this church off the ground. He had to be here to do it. It's really something. Okay. The household of Stephanas were the first converts in Achaia, and, because there's an and that they have devoted themselves to the service of the saints, that is the believers, Christian believers. Look at that word, devoted themselves. I would say that, shouldn't it read that they've devoted themselves to Jesus? You know, private devotionals, private prayer. No. Well, obviously, yes, but this even more. They devoted themselves to the service of the saints. Devoted is a strong word. That means single-minded passion. I feel passionate about your development, not just mine. I'm thinking about you. Then Paul says in verse 16, be subject to such as these. You know, the folks who are thinking about other people's spiritual development and praying for them and visiting them and doing something. Paul says, be subject to those. Now, what's interesting here is that Paul could have said, well, first of all, find out who's in charge. Here's how you should subject yourself. Check and see who are the deacons, who are the elders, who's the senior pastor, who's the assistant pastor, who's running kids' church, who's running AV. Find out and subject yourself to them. But Paul is not telling us to subject ourselves to titles. He's telling us subject ourselves to examples. I mean, this puts all of us on the spot. If you have a position or a place in the church, you've got to ask, am I living a life that others should emulate? A title is not enough. Men and women follow examples. That's what we all do. Paul is suggesting the same here. Now, I'm not knocking titles because there are such things as elders and deacons in the New Testament, okay? All it really does is put those elders and deacons on the spot to be people that ought to be followed,